Welcome to Present Poetry. I'm your host, Erin Crittenden, and all poems within this podcast are either public domain or used with permission from the author or the author's estate. It's a fun time for poetry lovers of all ages, so sit back, relax, and get ready to hear some poems of the past and the present. This week's featured poet is Aristotle. Aristotle was born in 384 BC in the town of Stegria, located in the Macedonian region of Greece. At 17, he was sent to Athens to learn under Plato at Plato's Academy, one of the most prominent schools in the ancient world. He stayed there until Plato's death in 347 BC, before traveling to Assos, a village on the northwest coast of what is present-day Turkey. He then moved to Lesbos, where he married Pythias, the niece of his friend Hermeias, and had a daughter. In 343 BC, Aristotle went to Pella to tutor the king's 13-year-old son, who would soon be known throughout the world as Alexander the Great. By all accounts, Aristotle led a fascinating life full of traveling and teaching, and when he returned to Athens, he founded a school of his own, known as the Lyceum. Then, in 322 BC, Aristotle died of natural causes. However, his legacy lives on, and he is widely regarded as one of the greatest philosophical minds of all time. He gave us logic, or the principles of correct reasoning, enhanced our understanding and acceptance of science, and provided a host of other philosophical ideas and understandings. This week's episode is a little bit different because instead of poetry, we will be reading from his lecture on poetry, known as the Poetics, to get a glimpse into the ancient world and how they viewed the art of poetry and its effect on the people. Poetic number 4. Poetry, in general, seems to have sprung from two causes, each of them lying deep in our nature. First, the instinct of imitation is implanted in man from childhood, one difference between him and other animals being that he is the most imitative of living creatures, and, through imitation, learns his earliest lessons. And no less universal is the pleasure felt in things imitated. We have evidence of this in the facts of experience. Objects which in themselves we view with pain, we delight to contemplate when reproduced with minute fidelity, such as the forms of the most ignoble animals and of dead bodies. The cause of this, again, is that to learn gives us the liveliest pleasure, not only to philosophers, but to men in general, whose capacity, however, of learning is more limited. Thus the reason why men enjoy seeing a likeness is that in contemplating it they find themselves learning or inferring, and saying perhaps, "Ah, that is he." For if you happen not to have seen the original, the pleasure will be due not to the imitation as such, but to the execution, the coloring, or some such other cause. Imitation, then, is one instinct of our nature. Next, there is the instinct for harmony and rhythm, meters being manifestly sections of rhythm. Persons, therefore, starting with the natural gift, developed by degrees their special aptitudes, till their rude improvisations gave birth to poetry. Poetry now diverged in two directions, according to the individual character of the writers. The graver spirits imitated noble actions and the actions of good men. The more trivial sort imitated the actions of meaner persons, at first composing satires, as the former did hymns to the gods and the praises of famous men. Poetic number 9. It is, moreover, evident from what has been said that it is not the function of the poet to relate what has happened, but what may happen, what is possible according to the law of probability or necessity. The poet and the historian differ not by writing in verse or in prose. The work of Herodotus might be put into verse, and it would still be a species of history, with meter no less than without it. The true difference is that one relates what has happened, the other what may happen. Poetry, therefore, is a more philosophical and higher thing than history, for poetry tends to express the universal, history the particular. By the universal, I mean how a person of a certain type will on occasion speak or act according to the law of probability or necessity, and it is this universality at which poetry aims. Poetic number 20. Language in general includes the following part: letter, syllable, connecting word, noun, verb, inflection or case, sentence or phrase. A letter is an indivisible sound, yet not every sound, but only one which can form part of a group of sounds, for even brutes utter indivisible sounds, none of which I call a letter. The sound I mean may be either a vowel, a semivowel, or a mute. A vowel is that which without impact of tongue or lip has an audible sound. A semivowel, that which with such impact has an audible sound. A mute, that which with such impact has by itself no sound, but joined to a vowel, sound becomes audible. These are distinguished according to the form assumed by the mouth and the place where they are produced, according as they are aspirated or smooth, long or short, as they are acute, grave, or of an intermediate tone, which inquiry belongs in detail to the writers on meter. A syllable is a non-significant sound composed of a mute and a vowel, but the investigation of these differences belongs also to the metrical science. A connecting word is a non-significant sound which neither causes nor hinders the union of many sounds into one significant sound. It may be placed at either end or in the middle of a sentence. Or a non-significant sound, which out of several sounds, each of them significant, is capable of forming one significant sound. Or a non-significant sound, which marks the beginning, end, or division of a sentence, such, however, that it cannot correctly stand by itself at the beginning of a sentence. A noun is a composite significant sound, not marking time, of which no part is in itself significant. For in double or compound words we do not employ the separate parts as if each were in itself significant. A verb is a composite significant sound, marking time, in which, as in the noun, no part is in itself significant. For man or white does not express the idea of when, but he walks or he has walked does connotate time, present or past. Inflection belongs both to the noun and the verb, and expresses either the relation of, to, or the like, or that of number, whether one or many, as man or men, or the modes or tones in actual delivery, like a question or command. Did he go, and go are verbal inflections of this kind. A sentence or phrase is a composite significant sound, some at least of whose parts are in themselves significant, for not every such group of words consists of verbs and nouns. The definition of man, for example. But it may dispense even with the verb. Still, it will always have some significant part, as in walking, or Cleon, son of Cleon. A sentence or phrase may form a unity in two ways, either as signifying one thing, or as consisting of several parts linked together. Poetic 25. With respect to critical difficulties and their solutions, the number and nature of the sources from which they may be drawn may be thus exhibited. The poet, being an imitator, like a painter or any other artist, must of necessity imitate one of three objects: things as they were or are, things as they are said or thought to be, or things as they ought to be. The vehicle of expression is language, either current terms or, it may be, rare words or metaphors. There are also many modifications of language, which we concede to the poets. Add to this that the standard of correctness is not the same in poetry and politics, any more than in poetry and any other art. Within the art of poetry itself, there are two kinds of faults, those which touch its essence and those which are accidental. If a poet has chosen to imitate something but has imitated it incorrectly through want of capacity, the error is inherent in the poetry. But if the failure is due to a wrong choice, if he has represented a horse as throwing out both his off legs at once, or introduced technical inaccuracies in medicine, for example, or in any other art, the error is not essential to the poetry. These are the points of view from which we should consider and answer the objections raised by critics. First, as it matters, which concern the poet's own art. If he describes the impossible, he is guilty of an error, but the error may be justified if the end of the art thereby attained, the end being that already mentioned, if, that is, the effect of this or any other part of the poem is thus rendered more striking. If, however, the end might have been as well, or better, attained without violating the special rules of the poetic art, the error is not justified, for every kind of error should, if possible, be avoided. In examining whether what has been said or done by someone is poetically right or not, we must look merely to the particular act or saying, and ask whether it is poetically good or bad. We must also consider by whom it was said or done, to whom, when, by what means, or for what end, whether, for instance, it be to secure a greater good or avert a greater evil. In general, the impossible must be justified by reference to artistic requirements, or to the higher reality, or to received opinion. With respect to the requirements of art, a probable impossibility is to be preferred to a thing improbable and yet possible. To justify the irrational, we appeal to what is commonly said to be. In addition to which, we urge that the irrational sometimes does not violate reason, just as it is probable that a thing may happen contrary to probability. Things that sound contradictory should be examined by the same rules as in dialectical refutation, whether the same thing is meant in the same relation and in the same sense. We should therefore solve the question by reference to what the poet says himself or to what is tactfully assumed by a person of intelligence. Thank you for listening to this episode of Present Poetry. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review, share us on social media, or subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you would like to learn more about the featured poet, or you would like your work featured on the podcast, please check out the links in the show notes. Thank you again for listening, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.